Want to be respectful of your time, so I'm going to go ahead and start, and people can join in as they get here. We have an hour set aside for this, and we really will not go over unless some of you are wanting to hang out with Linda or I at the end, but I will keep us on time. I'm going to share my screen, and Linda, if you'll keep up with what's in the chat, because
Yes, ma'am.
I get distracted,
Yes.
and start talking about other things. So are we good for those of you who I can see? Are we good to start? Yeah. Okay. Good with you, Linda?
Yes, ma'am. We're ready to roll.
Okay. Okay. One thing I want to say at the outset is that I'm not a writing teacher. I've never been a writing teacher. I'm not an English teacher or a reading teacher or any other kind of language teacher. So I'm not coming at this from the perspective of someone who wants to teach you how to write. I'm coming at this as a former professor in my own department for quite a long time, and working with students who maybe had some struggles with communicating with some of their faculty. So with that said, please don't take what I say as the rules about writing. This is a much broader conversation than that. We want you to, if you have concerns about expectations at a grad level, we want you to have a little sense of what they are. I want you to be able to think about your own strategies for writing and how they work for you or don't. Want you to have some ideas about ways to expand your own strategies, and just know something about what writing at grad level is like. And it matters for a few reasons. One of the biggest concerns students who come back into graduate school express is a lack of confidence about their ability to write and a lack of time. Our students are busy. They may be working, plus going to grad school, plus taking care of aging parents or raising kiddos or trying to have their relationship. They have multiple responsibilities. And they may also not have a lot of skill in knowing how to use scholarly resources and know how to use things like the library effectively. So if you have that a little concern in terms of your confidence level, we want you to know that. That's even more true for people who have been out for a while. They've been out working and they decide to come back to grad school because they want to change career or advance their careers. It's also really an important skill in advancing in the business world, or if you decide you want to finish whatever you're doing here and then you want to teach at junior college or you want to teach in a university, it's important there as well. And sometimes what we do when we're in school is we look at writing as basically a box to check off. I've got to get this paper in. I've got to get this thesis or dissertation in. I've got to get this essay in, but don't really think about it as a thing unto itself. And then the other reason it's important is that expectations from your faculty are higher in some ways than they were for you when you were an undergrad student. Comments about that? Okay, so there are a few differences between graduate and undergraduate writing, and none of those are written down anywhere. They're not official. So it's nothing you can go look up, although you can Google it and get some discussions about that. One of the things that can be really different is the purpose of the writing. Yes, you're doing it to fulfill an assignment of some sort. But the purpose is generally broader at grad school by the time, at least by the time you get into your more advanced courses, because you are writing for broader relevance. You're writing very often being expected to address higher levels or more complex levels of knowledge demonstration than you are at undergraduate level. So you're expected to summarize, or you're expected to synthesize, some of which you probably did by the end of your undergrad program. You may be expected to evaluate or critique, which is a higher level skill. You may be expected to compare various scholarly approaches to something in your discipline. And that's another thing. The formatting and the vocabulary can be really specific to your discipline. One of the things I really liked about grad school, even though it was longer ago than most of you are old probably, but I really liked that grad school was all about my interest area. You know, it was things I was interested in. In undergrad, you have to take all the things, all the core elements, but sometimes even before you can get into your primary interest area. Your graduate program isn't like that. You're focused on a specific discipline, even if it's a cross-disciplinary, even if it's a discipline that crosses disciplines, like some of the sciences, they're not strictly one thing, but they have some of this and some of this and some of that, because to do good research means being cross-disciplinary. And when you write, you need to follow the conventions of the field. We'll talk more about that in case it's not clear. So another thing that may be different is that your relationships, the general professor-student relationships, may be different. And they will be different between different faculty members, even in the same field. You can expect that mentoring into your discipline may be something that is a real strong point for some faculty members, and then for other faculty members, they're really focused on something else. You may have more one-to-one or more small group interactions with your grad faculty than you did with your undergrad faculty. The writing expectations may be different too. One of the ways they may be different is the amount of detail you're given in advance, and the amount of step-by-step instructions may be different. When I taught, I just retired from the teaching part of this job last year, so that wasn't eons ago. But when I taught, one of the things that could be really frustrating for students is, well, sorry, that they wanted to know really specific things. They wanted to know things like, how long does this paper need to be? And my answer was always, whatever it takes to cover the topic, you know? And some of that was not just being, well, none of it was being sarcastic. It was recognizing that some people use more words, some people are really concise and still cover things well. But the important thing was, did you answer the question or the questions, or did you explain the process? Other faculty members give, in my own program, the program I taught in, give very specific, no more than 12 pages, no fewer than 10 pages. What you see will be different from faculty to faculty member. Some faculty members may have a certain outline they want you to follow. Others may not. It's just, like I said, different. There's also often difference in the amount of feedback given, and if you're able to get corrective feedback before you submit for a final grade. Some faculty members will let you submit. They'll do if you do it early enough, they'll give you some general feedback and then you can resubmit. That's not true for everybody. And there's more expectation that students will correct their own work. Okay. Another thing that's important is the mechanics, if you will, and basic grammar. A reasonable command of that is expected in grad school. You'll see the title of a book up there, Eats, Shoots, and Leaves. And if you can, one way you might imagine that is, okay, I eat some peanuts, then I shoot some pool, and then I leave wherever it is I'm doing now. 3 separate things. Contrast that with, look at the bottom, Eat, Shoots, and Leaves. What do you think about if you see Eat, Shoots, and Leaves?
That I'm eating shoots and leaves. That I'm actually eating shoots and leaves.
Sure, or a panda. Yeah, it brings up a different image. So how you use punctuation can make the difference in what you're intending to say is actually communicated. Now, there are different style guides for different disciplines. In my discipline, we use APA style guide. But MLA is a strong one. Chicago style manual is another one. The sciences have some very specific journal styles that they may want people to use. And even things like how tables are formulated and how punctuation is used or how much you indent a paragraph, all of those things can be different according to the style you're using. So you'll want to know that from your discipline. It's not that there's one right way. I'm always going to have that last comma before the and because that's the style guide I was brought up with and the one that makes the easiest sense to me. But other people don't do that, and that's okay. It's still correct. Does that make sense? I'm watching the faces I can see, and so. Going to shift gears quite a bit here. Another thing to think about as you come into grad school is just what are your strategies? How do you write? Think about that. For me, I do this now. I've done it all the way back to high school. I tend to think things over in my head and kind of obsess about them before I start writing. I read a good bit and then I think about it and think about it, and then I write. And then I generally think about it some more and write some more. What never worked for me was making an outline the way I was taught to do it in high school and even my early college days, and then write from an outline. It didn't work for me. That's not how I think and process things. I could make myself do it if I had an English class assignment to do that, but that's just not how I do it. Another thing that works for me is to write sections. I know that several things are going to be covered, so I can write sections, and I'm probably going to have to reorder them, and I'm probably going to have to rewrite them. That works for me. Is one of you willing to unmute and say what works for you or what doesn't work for you? Any one thing that works for you? Or put it in the chat and Linda can tell me what it says.
I agree with the whole outlines not working. I tried really hard during undergrad to do an outline because all of my peers would, and I could never get it correct. My writing always went off the handle by the time I was writing the final product.
That's me. It was a lot of energy expended and a lot of time that I could have used thinking or writing little sections of things. Yeah. And thank you.
I find the obsessing point you were talking about very useful because that's something which I use for sure. I have a lot of times where I'd write something down on, let's say, Monday. I'd come back on Tuesday or Wednesday, look at it, and just have something I want to add on to it, right? And that's just through going through the same topic over and over. And just through that process, learning more, adding more, it really did help for me.
Yes. Yes, I do that as well. Yeah. And it's surprising sometimes what you run across when you go back to it and do a new search, for example. Or you read something and you see a reference you want to, oh, I'll look at that too. Yeah. So the message is that one way of doing it isn't going to necessarily work all the time. The more familiar you are with what tends to work for you, the better. You can start there and know that you're going to come across topics maybe or assignments from time to time where that's just not working, or where you're just in a place where that's not working right now. You need to do something else. So maybe it would be better for you to, even things like whether you have music on. I know people who can write with music, you know, they've got their headsets on or their and it really helps them. I wish it was a good strategy. For me, it's not, because I get carried away in the music, and before you know it, I'm doing dance steps in my chair. I mean, I just can't. You know, I did go too strongly to the music. So I don't need quiet, but I can't do music because I get distracted. Somebody else might be distracted by the television. You know, somebody can be watching television and around me, and I can tune it completely out. So know that about yourself and honor that, whatever that is. It may be that sometimes you really just need to be in the library where other people are working too, as opposed to being at home where you're tempted to do chores or go get ice cream or Cheetos or whatever it is you do to distract yourself or play with your pup or your cat or your turtle. So pay attention to yourself and do what's working for you at the time. It's useful to think about strategies that maybe you've never used before, kind of earlier in your program instead of later. And that you can do that by just looking at what other people do who seem to be successful at getting their writing done. It doesn't mean they're necessarily the best writers in the world, but they have a process. Does the thing about having strategies or a process make sense to you generally? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Let's talk about some general tips. One thing to pay attention to, and I don't know how big a role this played in your undergrad programs, but if your syllabi include writing assignments, read them. Some will have a lot of instructions for the assignment, and they may also have rubrics that tell you that, okay, 50% of the grade for this is going to come from content. And 20% is going to come from the scope of the references that you found. And 10% is going to come from this. And it may tell you all of that where you, so that you have a good sense of where you want to put a lot of the energy. And it may even give you a split for what kind of content. You know, are you actually comparing and contrasting it? Do I see evidence of synthesis? Whatever, but read the rubrics and read the instructions. Faculty tend to notice if you don't read the instructions. We notice, you know. And one reason is that most faculty members are really, really invested in our students doing well and being successful and learning. And so we evaluate how we write instructions, and we evaluate how we write syllabi. So if I give an assignment and I don't get papers that are showing me anything really reflective of what I was intending people go away with, the first thing I have to look at is my instructions. What was the assignment? Is not what everybody did wrong, is what did I do? Now I told people to do things that was evidently confusing, and most of your faculty have done that. And so read the instructions and then ask questions. If it's still not clear to you, ask questions. We do want to know that you read the syllabus first, read the instructions first before you ask us questions. And be clear about the kind of thing you're writing, because if you're asked to write a reflective paper, are y'all familiar with that term? The ones I see a couple of yeses and a couple of no response. So a reflective paper is more about thinking. It's a meta paper, if you will. It's thinking about how you were thinking, or thinking about how an experience was, or thinking about how an assignment impacted your learning. But it's a reflection, which is a real different paper than a lit review or a research paper or an essay paper about a particular topic in your discipline. So when you're doing your writing, take into account the kind of paper you're writing. Reflection papers may not need any references. Why would they? But again, look at what your instructions provide. Use the style guide from your discipline when you write, by the way, or elements of it. So in my discipline, like I said, it's APA. If somebody is writing a lit review, there are a whole lot of conventions that need to be followed. I mean, everything from how tables are set up to whether or not how the headings within the paper are set up, how the reference section is set up. All of that needs to be done according to APA style guide. If it's an answer to an essay question, which may be several pages long, all of that's not needed. And it's up to me as the instructor to tell people, but you want to use the basic conventions. Does that make sense to you? And your instructor also may say about certain kind of thing, I don't worry about APA for this. Just make it clean where I can read it. Double space it all. Indent paragraphs so I can read it. Another thing you may want to consider, depending on your writing load, is to make it routine. Because part of my process, a big part of my process is reading and thinking and getting more information and reading and thinking and getting more information before I write. I may be writing later than some people are writing. but waiting until the last minute to write is not a good idea most of the time in grad school, because you need enough time to proofread and make edits. It's a good idea to use your calendar in grad school, so that it becomes routine. And one way to do that is to backwards plan. Any of you already do that? Some of you do. Okay, so if you know you've got an assignment due on September the 14th, then I'm gonna back that up. October 25th, then you may have other things noted on your calendar prior to that to cue yourself to start doing whatever. And one of the things may be complete the paper by October the 18th, which gives you a week to proof it or to have somebody else read it and tell you if it makes sense. That's what we're talking about here. There are some software programs, and there's stuff built into Word that will give you some suggestions about punctuation or about spelling or about grammar. Pay attention to them and don't assume they're always right. They're not. But if I get a paper and I open it in Word and there's a lot of misspelled words that are clearly marked in Word, then I'm wondering why you didn't fix them. Really? It's right here, it tells you. So, but sometimes you just have to say ignore when you use those programs because it's a weird word and Microsoft doesn't seem to know it exists. So there you do what you need to do. Be aware that revision is a good thing, and the further you go in grad school, the more likely you are to have assignments that call for revisions of papers. And if you're going into a discipline where you will be submitting to journals, there's always going to be revisions. If you do a thesis or a PhD, a dissertation, you're going to get asked for revisions from my office. I don't know that we've ever gotten a thesis or dissertation that didn't need some revision in terms of the front matter and the formatting that we require. So it's not that I'm over in my office reading marine science and editing and requiring revisions to content in marine sciences or biology. Not my field. I'm not qualified to do that, but I will see things that are just messed up in the paper, and it is my job very much to make sure those get cleaned up. So whatever kind of revisions you get, take it as to the extent you can, take it as useful. Sometimes it's just really irritating, but take it as useful to the extent you can. Reading helps, by the way. Reading helps your writing. And reading in your discipline helps your within discipline writing, because you sort of get the flow of how things are done. Does that make sense to people? Yeah, okay, everybody's nodding about that. And always feel good about reaching out to the Writing Center. As a graduate student, you're entitled to, Linda's going to correct me if I'm wrong about this, but I want to say 3 sessions a week with them. Is that right, Linda?
I believe so. Yeah. They're eager to help. We talk to them all the time, and they've got people online, in person. They're like this. They come in, please. They're a great resource.
And if you're a doctoral student working on your dissertation, you can get even more time than that. So they won't do copy editing for you, but they will help you do things like make your paragraphs make sense, or help you with flow, or learn how to do, learn how to up your game with writing. So they'll ask you what you need, feel free to reach out to them. Sarah Pons is the name of the person who's in charge over there. She's wonderful. I'm trying to watch the time. Ooh, okay. So I'm going to move to some specific tips. Again, remember, I'm not a writing teacher. These are really broad tips. One of the things you want to do is structure your paper so that the flow is organized and clear. Most often, but not always, you'll move from the broader to the more specific and detailed ideas. Sometimes you'll do the opposite. What you want to avoid is going back and forth between the two ways of organizing, because it's really confusing for a reader. It may make perfectly good sense to you because you really know this topic. But if I'm reading it and you're going from broad to specific and back to broad, and then you're going from specific to broad back to it, it's just confusing. It can be hard to track. Making your, connecting the ideas are important through the paper. And defining really special terms is important. There are terms we use in my discipline that are common in my discipline, and so I don't need to define them if the paper is written for people in my discipline. If I'm writing a paper so that it makes sense to somebody not in my discipline, I may need to define those words. And there are actually guidelines about how to do that. You want to provide sources of information as well. Avoid casual language in the papers you write. You'll see that your faculty members have, your different faculty members have preferences for that. There are things that I didn't like reading, like with my dissertation students, for example. So-and-so mentioned that. Well, mentioned is kind of casual for what you're saying, and the person more than mentioned it, they made a big deal out of it. So that's not what I want to read, so I could be picky about words. So you may find that some of your faculty are picky about words, but all of us are going to be different. But you don't want to use cliches. You want to use a professional voice. Cite. Learn how to cite from what you find online. If you're using ideas from social media, or specific things from social media, learn how to cite that. Cite. You need to, in grad school, what we look for is that you basically cite anything that's not your original idea. That's not 100% true. Again, it depends on the kind of paper. But if you're writing a research paper or a lit review or some kind of formal paper, it's a matter of giving credit to the originators of the idea. And follow the instructions. Yeah, we notice. We do notice. Faculty members notice. Questions? Okay, I'm going to have to move along. Write with clarity as part of your goal. Writing clearly takes effort. Early in a paper, you want to state what the goal is of your paper. It may not be written as the goal of this paper is. You may have a purpose statement or something, but you need something pretty early to know, so that your reader knows what the purpose is. If concrete examples are appropriate, use them. and try to avoid wordiness. I can write one of the longest sentences you've ever read because I am wordy. I am wordy, and I can punctuate it correctly and all of that. And I don't need a sentence that's 4 lines long. I have to really work against that and shorten that. And I like to explain some things in 6 different ways. You don't need to do that in your writing, and it's distracting. So avoid wordiness. Use headings and subheadings where they're going to be helpful, and be consistent. So if you tell me early in the paper that you're going to discuss blue, red, and yellow, then what I'm set up for is that you're going to discuss blue, and then you're going to discuss red, and then you're going to discuss yellow. And then maybe you're going to talk about how they relate to each other. But do so in an order that's consistent with what you say you're going to do. It just helps your reader follow. That's what you want to do, is write clearly for your reader. You can use transitional phrases like however, or in some, or in contrast to, but you want to use them correctly. So, people don't frequently. So here's an example. I saw this wonderful abstract art piece, semicolon. However, comma, I really wanted a snow cone. Those 2 pieces of the sentence are not connected in any way, unless I had set it up so that snow cones and abstract art were connected. That may sound ridiculous, but people do that in papers all the time because they're trying to use these transitional phrases. It's just that they're not using them correctly. If I say in sum, then what I'm telling the reader is I'm about to sum up now, at least this little thing. If I say in contrast to, I'm contrasting 2 things. Does that sounds obvious, I'm sure, but does it make sense to you? Yeah. It really, really helps to have somebody read your paper or your document who's really not been involved in your work, maybe even somebody who's not in your field, and then find out what they understand from reading it, to see if you've been successful in communicating what you want to communicate. We good? I'm going to switch gears big time now. I want to talk about a minute about emails, because one of the complaints I hear at meetings, not just on our campus, but other university campuses, is how students use emails with their faculty. And a lot of students, you may notice you're younger than a lot of your faculty. So a lot of students you've grown up with emails and text and really short, brief ways of communicating. A lot of your faculty have not, let me put it that way. And many students email in the same way they might text. So, hey, Dr. Oliver, or no, hey, Dr. O, how you doing? Well, truthfully with me, that's okay because I'm really casual. But if you did that with another member of my department, that would have been, whoa, boundary violations all over the place, timeout. First thing we got to talk about is how you email. So it's a good idea to start, until you know your faculty member well enough, to start a little more on the formal side. Hello, Dr. Oliver. And then be clear. It's more like you would do in a letter, only a really short letter, because emails are not really designed to be really long communications. So back to the notion that your faculty members are all going to be different. They're going to be different about that as well. So it's safer to start a little on the more formal side. Use your university email, by the way, because your faculty has requirements to communicate with you that way. We use your Islander email. That's what we're supposed to do. And some students work here and have regular university email, which is first name dot last name at CAMUCC or something similar to that. But the majority of students have an Islander email account. It doesn't mean, just because you need to be a little more formal to begin with, it doesn't mean you can't be relational at the same time. I hope your trip went well. Whatever. If be clear about requesting a follow-up meeting or a letter of recommendation or whatever, and clarify what the topics are going to be for your email in your own head. Use a subject line that's helpful. Request for reference. Something like that. Part of why I say that is because faculty members, just like you, get a bazillion emails. Not literally, but a lot of emails, and have to prioritize sometimes how they get to those, and they want to get to student requests in a very efficient manner. If you're emailing about a specific class, be sure to give the name of the class you're emailing about, and your full name. Your faculty won't automatically know that, and you can make their lives easier by letting them know you're writing about chemistry 5360. And it's fine to follow up if you don't. Somebody has a hand raised. Ask your question.
I had a
Oh.
question about using Blackboard for messaging. Does it associate that you're asking via that particular class, or do you need to specify I'm asking about this class?
There's a couple of different ways in Blackboard to do things. So one way will send a message directly to, it comes in like a university email. The other is really specific to the class. It's an internal class communication. And in that, you certainly don't need to specify. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, there's two different ways. With the internal one, it still notifies me that I have an email, maybe. So if it's something you want a response about anytime soon, like before the next class meeting or when I'm going to be inside Blackboard again, use the other one. That'll send me an email directly to my email. Some of your faculty will put instructions like that about what works best for them directly in the syllabus or in some of the Blackboard instructions. Excuse me. It's fine to follow up, but give it sufficient time. I think most of us have gotten used to really quick turnarounds because we do so much stuff online. You can tell that I tend to talk really informally. And it's okay with me for people to talk informally, but when writing, I just need to say that, then I clean it up. But we're used to getting responses pretty quickly. give your faculty sufficient time to respond. And many faculty members are trying to keep reasonable parameters around their time, and maybe have rules for themselves that they're not going to answer emails on the weekends, that, you know, they'll answer during the week. They'll generally tell you that. Other faculty members will answer on the weekends, but you're never going to get a response from them at 8 o'clock in the morning. That would have been me. I'm not answering emails at 8 in the morning. So give people 2 or 3 days at least to respond, or you can find out from them what the response, you know, at what point you should follow up. Yes. It's a good idea, just a few tips here. It's a good idea not to ask your professor what course you're taking with them. You know, that it's really better if you know what course you're taking with them. It's really better if you don't ask them for information that is right there in the syllabus. Look at the syllabus first and then ask for clarification. It's really better if you don't write your professor an email when you're really ticked off. Give yourself time to breathe, so that you're writing in a calmer tone. It's a bad idea to threaten your professor. If you don't do this, I'm going straight to the dean. Okay. That's not the best way. You have the right always to go to the program coordinator or the chair or the dean, but that's not the best way to start your interaction. Already mentioned, don't write excessively long things. If there's a really longer thing to talk about, consider an office visit or a phone call. And don't, like I said, assume a more casual or social tone unless that's already negotiated. And by negotiated, I don't mean that you had this conversation about, Dr. Oliver, is it okay if I'm casual in my conversation? But we've established that in the relationship. That's what I mean by negotiated. Almost there. There are other things that you will see in grad school, sometimes memos, sometimes online course platforms. The platform you're using can really shape how you're writing within you. Somebody brought up Blackboard. There may be discussion boards. There are ways to send and receive messages to your faculty member or to whole groups of people. There may be groups set up in Blackboard for class projects, and your faculty member will always have access to those. And that may be way less formal about how that's structured, and the kind of communication that is expected, because the goals are to get things done and to achieve certain tasks. So all of that should be set up for you, unless an instructor gives you a specific task to set up and the means to do it, because some things you don't have the means to do in Blackboard unless the instructor has set it up so that you can do it. If there's a discussion board, for example, I have to set that up for my students. Nobody else can do that. But then I may ask that, Melanie, you be in charge of this discussion, and you'll be the one that's kind of facilitating getting this discussion going or keeping it going. And then Michael, you are responsible for this discussion board and you keep it going. And Does that make sense? So and it's not unusual to have that set up that way in grad programs, again, depending on the program and the course, where the faculty member is asking individual students as a part of their learning to run a particular discussion board. I'll still be in there. I'll still comment. It's my job. It's important that faculty be in those discussion boards, but really looking to you to run them. You can send letters, actual snail mail letters. You can write letters and attach them to an email or memos. That's all legit to do. And we got here at the end before 1. Linda, be proud of me.
Very proud. I'm always proud.
Okay. So 2 things to take away. One is remember that all your faculty members are different, just like all of the students are different. And we just need to honor that with each other and be accommodating of our different styles. Pay attention to what various faculty members expect. And then the other thing is to use resources that are available to you. The Writing Center is a big one for this topic, but there are also librarians who are almost magic in their ability to help you find material in your discipline. Grad Studies is available to you. We provide workshops over in Grow, but we also, if you run into difficulties with some of the administrative task of getting through grad school and you can't find solutions, we can help you with those. Any questions? Anything you would like added to a workshop like this?
No, I thought it
Uh,
was a good
sorry.
refresher.
Oh, thank you.
Just, yeah, it's been a long time since I've been doing any of this, so I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I actually want to ask, let's say I want to bring something to the Writing Center. Are there any expectations you have from our side for when we're bringing something to the Writing Center?
When to get it to them? Is that what you said?
No, what expectations you have from our side when we're bringing something to the Writing Center?
Okay, as an instructor?
Yes.
Okay. For me and what I taught? No, not usually. Sometimes I would, when I read papers, then I kind of get a sense of, okay, this is a repetitive issue for you. And I really recommend you talk to the Writing Center about how to structure paragraphs, for example, or how to do transitions. And you can go with your document and say, I need help me with transitions, and they'll help you do that. So, but you can go in there, just you, and say, I'd really like some feedback in general about how I'm writing. And do you have recommendations? What they won't do is that you go hand them the paper and say, hey, would you edit this for me? And they'll say politely, no. No, tell me what you want help with. So sometimes, yes, I would give instructions because of what I see, recurrent issues I see for a student.
I think one thing I will like to add, though, is as we work through the process of revisions and going through that, I think a lot of students sometimes are shocked of like, wait a minute, my work's perfect. And it's like our dean said to me the other day, she's publishing with fellow colleagues and she says, I still get edits back. And I've been doing this a long time. So she's like, this is the name of the game. Edits are always going to be in your life. Copy editors are always going to give you back. But our job in supporting you two is that we see things and we need to take it to that next level because we have, university has accreditation. We have to have certain standards in order for us to keep this accreditation. So your writing, your published writing has to look a certain way, a certain prescribed way. And there are things that you may not look at because you're neck deep in your research, you're passionate about what you want to, what you're writing. So we see things from a higher level, and we're going to help you tweak those last little pieces, dotting those I's and crossing those T's. We do that in partnership with you, and we have workshops like this in person and online and meetings to help you do those pieces. If you, like I said, if you plan to do publish a thesis or a dissertation, we're there to partner with you and help you through that whole piece. And when we give review, when Dr. Oliver, other reviewers provide edits to your work, we go one. If we put 25 on there, you better believe I'm going to make sure all 25 were correct and that we're done. And so in the end, it's a beautiful labor of love, but it's a beautiful piece of work, and especially when you can Google it and your name and you're part of the repository for the university. Well, we're right at the 1 o'clock. Dr. Oliver, you don't mind, we can stay on for a little bit if anybody has other questions. If you all would like, you can send me a direct message, Linda Barbado, in the chat with your email, and I can email you these slides, and also provide college or graduate studies contact information, as well as those of you who are going to be on campus or be here in Corpus Christi area. A small plug for Grow. If you haven't been there, our graduate resource and opportunity workspace, it's in the library. It's exclusive to graduate students. No undergrads can get in, only grads. It has a computer lab, a quiet computer lab. It's got a workspace for you in groups to do group meetings. And we call it like the graduate living room. We've got always have free coffee. We always have snacks. There's different booths to sit in. There's couches. There's just a way for you to chill. If you even need a moment just to go recalibrate your brain and sit with like-minded people and have a moment, or just have a nice place to work. It's on the first floor of the library. It's called Grow. And this is also where we do some of our workshops in there as well throughout the semester. We've got a couple coming up of different topics. Well,
Thanks,
thank you
everybody.
all for joining us. We really appreciate it.